Good afternoon. This is Carla Higgins from Douglas Laboratories. Today we will be presenting Using Beta-alanine the Right Way, Facts, Myths, and Essential Tips to Maximize Efficiency in Strength, Power, and Fitness Applications. To present this information, we have Dr. Kelly Heim, who is a pharmacologist specializing in natural products. As Senior Director of Scientific Affairs for Douglas Labs and Clean Athlete, he oversees the scientific integrity and safety of products by maintaining rigorous standards of research, evaluation, and its application to product formulation. Dr. Heim earned his doctorate in pharmacology from Dartmouth Medical School and his Bachelor of Science in Nutritional Biochemistry from the University of New Hampshire. His academic research, scholarly reviews, book chapters, and lectures have highlighted evolving concepts in nutrition, genomics, bioavailability, and pharmacology. He is also a bantamweight bodybuilder and physique competitor who applies evidence-based nutrition and training principles and competes exclusively in all-natural, drug-tested events. In today's presentation, Beta-alanine supplementation the right way, we will review the proven methods to support performance gains during strength, power, and hypertrophy-oriented training. A growing body of published evidence points to specific formulations and dosing protocols that have effectively support power output, strength, and stamina. In this webinar, Dr. Kelly Heim reviews key findings from the latest performance studies and advises on safe and effective application of beta-alanine for fitness or performance objectives, with a focus on sustained release formulations. Our learning objectives are to understand the effects of beta-alanine, who should consider supplementation, and what types of results to expect, recognize common mistakes athletes make that may result in suboptimal muscle retention and dose-limiting side effects. Lastly, understand how sustained release formulations simplify product use, improve compliance, and maximize results. If you would please all hold your questions till the end of the webinar. All attendees are on mute. You can submit any questions that you have for Dr. Heim through the questions toolbar on the right-hand side of your screen. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Heim.
Thank you, Carla. I'd like to thank all of you for being here today. It's my pleasure. I'd like to just get to the first part of our talk as soon as we can in the interest of time. First, I want to disclose that I am a paid advisor to Clean Athlete. I don't have any other conflicts of interest to disclose, and my opinions don't necessarily reflect those of the company. So I assume that we have a good wide variety of athletes, trainers, coaches, fitness enthusiasts, and so forth present today in our audience. And for all of you, most of you are probably familiar with the triad of training variables, volume, frequency, and intensity, that need to be optimized regardless of what your athletic or fitness goals really are. So strategic modification of these variables will determine how well you perform and how well you recover. Also, I want to emphasize that today's talk will focus on intensity. So if you do any kind of high intensity interval training, any kind of weight training, strength and power exercises, as part of your training, regardless of what sport you participate in or what your overarching objectives are, this information will probably be useful to you. So we all know what high-intensity anaerobic efforts feel like. And the simple truth is it's very unpleasant, and it keeps us from going further on a day-to-day basis. And most people understand what this feels like in the fact that you can't really sustain a high level of effort for very long because you feel what we know as the burn. Your muscles just can't contract very well once that sets in. And for a long time, we assumed that the burn was caused by a substance called lactic acid. But we're going to look closely at that long-standing dogma and understand the physiology that is behind that burning sensation in your muscles when you're trying to sustain a high level of effort for as long as you can. So if you lift weights, if you do any kind of high intensity running, sprinting, high intensity cycling or swimming, if you incorporate any kind of strength training as part of an endurance program. So we often focus on strength and power athletes when we're dealing with anaerobic metabolism, but endurance athletes also encounter barriers related to anaerobic metabolism and its limiting effects on performance as well. So a lot of this discussion will pertain to a wide variety of individuals and probably will be useful in some way. Before we go into more detail about the science behind the burn, I just want to point out that this is just one of many factors that will determine how well you perform in both training and competition. You want to pay attention to the other causes of fatigue: hydration status, the availability of fuel, how well your nutritional program is put into place in terms of macronutrients, oxygen levels, your environment, blood flow, the byproducts that are produced as part of normal metabolism, lactic acid being one of them. There are many, many different factors that determine how comfortable you are when you're training, obviously. Today, we're really just going to focus on the metabolic byproducts and really zero in on this lactate and lactic acid story. So lactic acid has long been culpable for the burn that you feel when you're exercising in an anaerobic metabolic state. The truth is, lactic acid dissociates into two compounds, lactate and a hydrogen ion. And the lactate serves as a fuel source. What's really happening is your muscles are using glucose for fuel because they can't use fat. In order to use fat, they would need more oxygen. You're not getting enough oxygen because you're working so hard that your aerobic metabolic machinery really kind of shuts down during that time. In a way, lactate is good. It allows the muscles to sustain performance for 1 to 3 minutes and enables glycolysis to generate energy. The downside is during this process, hydrogen ions are produced concurrently. These hydrogen ions accumulate and they cause the pH of the muscle to drop. And when that happens, the enzymes that are participating in your energy producing pathways don't work as well. So your metabolism inside of your muscles really doesn't perform nearly as well at low pH. And that causes a reduction in contractility of the muscle. So your muscle can't can't contract nearly as well as it could under resting conditions. And the harder you work, the more lactate and the more hydrogen ions are produced, the lower the pH gets, and the harder it is to keep those muscles contracting at their normal rate in order to sustain performance. So we all know what it feels like to fail when we're doing bench presses for as many reps as we possibly can, especially if you're going past the 6 to 8 rep range that is emphasized for strength and power training. If you're looking at a hypertrophy-oriented application, you are really spending more time within that zone of high hydrogen ion production. So this is just one example where this is a huge factor that limits performance both during training and during competition. So as exercise intensity increases, just to recapitulate what we talked about a moment ago, the use of glucose for fuel increases. The glucose is turned to lactic acid, and at some point you're going to get very tired, you're going to feel some pain and discomfort, and you're going to want to stop. So the burn is caused by hydrogen ions. These hydrogen ions impair muscle performance and muscle function. So if only we could go a little bit longer, we would probably get a greater training stimulus. So it all goes back to the saying that perfect practice makes perfect. If you don't train at a high intensity for at least part of your training, you can't really train at high intensity for all of your training. You're not supposed to do that. But strategic high intensity training is critical for performance and muscular adaptations. If you could prolong your time to failure, you could increase the quality of your training. So quality training equals quality performance. So it's really a similar principle. The better you can train, the better you're going to perform when it comes to sustaining that time in the zone where you're feeling that burn. If you go a little bit longer in your training, you're probably going to get more benefit from that training. So it's tempting to assume that any kind of supplement that's going to delay time to fatigue is really going to be useful for competitive situations only. But what I want to emphasize is high intensity training done right is going to make a huge difference in a variety of different athletic goals and fitness goals. And you really want to focus on that part of your training because you're going to probably appreciate the greatest benefit from that change in your training. The body produces a compound called carnosine that allows the hydrogen ions to be removed. So this is a buffer, and a buffer is anything that reduces the acidity or balances pH of whatever environment that compound is in. So carnosine is a dipeptide molecule. It's made out of alanine and histidine. These are two amino acids that the body has in very different quantities. Histidine is an amino acid shown here. These are the two amino acids. Histidine is really widespread in the body. We have a lot of it. We don't really need to consume it. The body just has enough of it to make plenty of carnosine. The rate limiting factor is the availability of the other component, beta-alanine. So alanine is an amino acid. Beta-alanine just refers to the specific configuration of the amino acid structure. But these are just two amino acids that need to be present inside of the muscle in order for carnosine to be made. And again, carnosine is essential for buffering the acidity of the muscle that occurs during high intensity anaerobic efforts. The more carnosine that you make, or the more carnosine that you have in your muscles, in both slow twitch and fast twitch, the better you're going to be able to buffer acid, and the longer you're going to be able to perform at a higher intensity. So picture yourself running around a track once or twice. So depending on your level of fitness and the type of training that you've done in order to prepare yourself for that type of effort, that's kind of the window of duration that you're looking at in order to benefit from elevated muscle carnosine content as a buffer. So we're looking at high intensity efforts that are typically less than 5 minutes in duration. There have been a number of studies on beta-alanine supplementation, and the most common conclusion, depending on what the researchers are specifically looking at, is that muscle carnosine levels go up considerably. Across many different dosing protocols, it is universally accepted that beta-alanine supplementation increases muscular carnosine levels by about 42 to 65%, and according to some estimates, it can reach 80%. So why not just take regular carnosine? Let's just go back to the carnosine molecule, and we're not going to really talk about the chemistry of it, but the way we ingest carnosine is really through animal products. We get it through meat. So if you're a vegetarian, you're probably not going to get a lot of carnosine in your diet. Carnosine is not as bioavailable. You're not going to increase muscle carnosine content nearly as well with carnosine supplementation compared to beta-alanine supplementation. So this is one of the reasons why beta-alanine supplementation is really the best way to augment intramuscular carnosine concentrations to improve buffering capacity and total exercise capacity. I want to mention that both type 1 and type 2 muscle fibers benefit from beta-alanine in terms of increasing the total amount of carnosine inside of the muscle fibers themselves. So we're looking at both endurance and strength athletes as benefiting from increased beta-alanine intake in terms of elevating intramuscular carnosine intake. There doesn't seem to be a preference in terms of the distribution of beta-alanine into different types of muscle fibers. But as I mentioned earlier, the athletes who are most likely to respond are the ones who perform primarily in the window of 1 to 5 minutes. So beta-alanine supplementation has been evaluated in 55 published scientific studies. There are 14 global patents on the carnosine that I'm going to be talking about later. Essentially, the overwhelming majority of the findings have shown that beta-alanine supplementation helps to balance pH levels during high-intensity efforts. Supplementation increases exercise capacity, allowing higher volume and more reps at a higher intensity. It also improves muscular endurance, so the longer you can go without fatiguing from the burn and the discomfort associated with reduced pH, and then delaying the onset of neuromuscular fatigue. So these are just a few of the findings that have been shown. There was a meta-analysis that was written in 2012 that attempted to look at a number of important things, including how well beta-alanine worked and what types of durations of exercise benefited most. And 1 to 4 minutes was the duration of exercise in which athletes benefited the most from supplementation. Anyone looking at sprinting or anything under 1 minute long, this was not associated with a significant benefit. So if you're a strength athlete or if you spend a lot of time lifting weights, the time under tension does make a difference. If you are extending your set past a number of reps that keeps you working longer than 1 minute, then the beta-alanine effect is probably going to be more significant for you compared to lifters who are looking at a time under tension less than 1 minute. So depending on your tempo of lifting, that the time it takes in order for you to complete a set is going to be different. But for starters, it might be a good idea to look at the clock and just get an idea of how long it takes you to complete a typical set, and pay attention to, whether it's less than a minute or over a minute. And the ones who are the sets that exceed 1 minute are most likely to respond to beta-alanine supplementation. The dose of 179.2 grams, don't be alarmed. That's a lot. That was not administered at once. That was just a dose that was administered over the entire period of each study on average. So that total amount that was administered showed a median improvement in whatever measurement they were looking at of 2.85%, and the range was really no benefit up to 10.5%. So that is really an effect size you're looking at. An effect size is that is a measurement of the magnitude of a phenomenon. It's a quantitative measure of how much of a benefit the individuals received from the supplement. So in other words, it helps answer the question, how well did it work? So a 10.49% improvement is pretty good, and everything was statistically significant here. So this was actually a very positive meta-analysis, and one of the figures is shown here. I just want to point to the middle part of the diagram here, where they were looking at duration of 60 to 240 seconds. So that's 1 to 4 minutes, and the most significant improvement in performance was seen during that interval. This study looked at the effects of beta-alanine supplementation on the onset of neuromuscular fatigue. They also looked at the ventilatory threshold in women. The ventilatory threshold, this is the intensity above which your breathing becomes labored, and you just can't draw in as much air as your body wants. Most of us can relate to the ventilatory threshold, the feeling that you get beyond that threshold. 22 women received 3.2 to 6.4 grams of SR carnosine. So this is a sustained release carnosine. And they also had a placebo group. They received the supplements for 28 days. They performed cycle ergometry to exhaustion, and they found that there was a significant improvement in the ventilatory threshold, so they could go longer without feeling out of breath. They also had a higher physical working capacity at the fatigue threshold, and their time to exhaustion was improved. In other words, it was extended, so they could go longer at high intensity without getting tired. This study was done in collegiate football players, and the purpose was to examine the effects of 30 days of beta-alanine supplementation on anaerobic performance measurements, and they were randomly divided to receive beta-alanine. This is a dose of 4.5 grams per day, or placebo. And they started 3 weeks before preseason football training camp, and then they continued for about 9 days during camp. And they looked at a 60-second Wingate anaerobic power test. They did some line drills, and they also looked at bench press. They found that increased volume was found in individuals taking the beta-alanine, so they were able to simply perform longer and last longer through different parts of their training, including lifting, and they had lower subjective feelings of fatigue. High intensity interval training is a very popular way to get a level of fitness that might be more achievable in a shorter amount of time compared to the long, slow cardio that people have often done to achieve cardiovascular fitness. High intensity interval training doesn't take as much time as the other types of cardiovascular training that people do. Also, it just goes back to our premise in the beginning about intensity being very important regardless of your fitness or athletic goals. So this looked at high intensity interval training, endurance performance, and the effect of beta-alanine supplementation in 46 young men who received 1.5 grams of beta-alanine 4 times a day or placebo for the first 21 days, then twice a day for 21 days. They did HIIT, high intensity training, for 6 weeks, and the researchers found significant improvements in VO2 max, time to exhaustion, and total work done after 3 weeks of training. VO2 max, for those of you who don't know, this is maximal oxygen consumption, and it really refers to the maximum amount of oxygen that a person can utilize during intense or maximal exercise, and that's an indicator of cardiovascular fitness and aerobic performance. Total work done, this is really a measurement of exercise capacity, so for those of you who are not aware of these acronyms. The International Society of Sports Nutrition occasionally publishes position stands on different types of supplements, and these position stands are very useful because they pull together all of the existing research to formulate a consensus, and that is peer-reviewed. So the position stand on beta-alanine, this was very well done, and the conclusions of the position stand mainly were 4 to 6 grams per day for at least 2 to 4 weeks improved exercise performance in these studies that were reviewed, mainly in efforts lasting 1 to 4 minutes, but more research is needed to determine whether it's beneficial for long durations of activity of 25 minutes and beyond. That window between 4 and 25 minutes is really understudied with respect to beta-alanine, and I know a lot of you probably dwell in that zone, but there really isn't enough information to be able to say whether beta-alanine is right for you. Paresthesia is this tingling sensation that people tend to experience with beta-alanine supplementation. I will say it is a very common phenomenon. It occurs in I would say most individuals who are just starting to take the supplement. Some can tolerate it better than others. Some experience high levels of it. Others don't experience much of it at all. It is really a dose-limiting factor, and the only way around it is to reduce the dose or to use a sustained release formulation, which we'll talk about in a moment. Most of the literature that I've cited so far has used carnosine. Carnosine is a branded form of carnosine. This is, beta-alanine. Researchers use it a lot. It's a trusted ingredient. We know that it works. We know exactly what doses work. The problem with this is, just like any beta-alanine, it's going to increase the risk of paresthesia, and that might not be great for an athlete who's just starting out and wants to use this. The athlete who's going to benefit from it is the one who's going to stick with it. So tolerability is a huge factor, and it's a huge reason why people struggle with beta-alanine. The sustained release beta-alanine really gets around that. I'll go into more detail, but the sustained release form has been very successful in studies, and some of them are shown here. Sustained release form has been utilized in a variety of peer-reviewed research, and really the same findings have been demonstrated in terms of delaying fatigue, and tolerability has been demonstrated as well. So who should consider supplementation? Before I go any further, just to summarize some of the things we've already talked about: athletes who routinely engage in high-intensity bouts, training and competition, 1 to 4 minutes. Those who are engaged in resistance training for strength, power, or hypertrophy or aesthetics. People who are vegetarians don't consume nearly as much carnosine as individuals with omnivorous diets. Masters athletes are probably good candidates as well, because as we get older, we don't have as much carnosine, we don't make as much of it. So you have a better opportunity to increase the total amount of carnosine in your muscle fibers. Who will benefit? It really just comes down to who's going to comply with supplementation. Who is going to take it every day? Who is not going to forget to take it? And who's not going to think that, well, I really don't want to take it today because I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want to feel the pins and needles. I don't want to feel the flushing, which, by the way, is harmless. It's due to beta-alanine interacting with what are called G protein coupled receptors on the ends of sensory neurons in the skin. It's completely harmless. It's just a little bit bothersome. One of the myths about beta-alanine is that dosing protocols need to be complicated. This is one example of a dosing protocol. There are 4 different regimens shown here. These are all effective and commonly used, commonly recommended, but it's a little bit labor intensive just to look at it. So to get around this, wouldn't it be easier to use a sustained release form that you can take a higher dose at once with a slow release, much less likely to cause the side effect of paresthesia, but offering a very similar, if not identical, benefit to beta-alanine. Sustained release beta-alanine simplifies daily dosing. Based on the research, you want to get in about 90 grams over 28 days, and that equates to 3.2 grams per day. This allows better retention with a sustained release form, better tolerability. You're still hitting the dose that you would need to on the basis of research that's been published. There have been studies on beta-alanine that go anywhere from 3.2 grams to 6.4 grams a day. So as long as you're within that range, keep in mind that a sustained release formulation is going to provide more beta-alanine over just a longer period of time. So you may not need the total dose that you would see in some of these studies, which is 6.4 grams is quite high. But SR-carnosine is the exact compound that's been researched. It's been the subject of a variety of studies that have demonstrated performance benefits, excellent tolerability. There was a study showing that the sustained release profile did improve total retention. It was remaining inside of the muscles longer and delivering the same overall effect, increasing beta-alanine concentration and enabling greater efficiency for muscle carnosine synthesis without the paresthesia-related sensations. So this is a really good way to start using beta-alanine if you've never used it before. And if you're typically using a standard form of beta-alanine, this is a great thing to try. This study looked at slow-release beta-alanine on absorption kinetics and paresthesia. It looked at 11 healthy adults. They took a single dose of either 1.6 grams of pure standard beta-alanine or a slow-release form or a placebo. And the sustained-release form delayed the time to peak plasma levels, meaning that it was slower in terms of elevating plasma levels, but the area under the curve remained the same, so the total amount in the bloodstream was the same. Urinary losses were lower as well, and they did not have any sensory side effects that were different from placebo. So this definitely validated the utility of the SR form versus the standard form. Another study on the sustained release form of carnosine, 7 men were recruited. They took 2 doses of 800 milligrams of SR carnosine per day. It was per dose, and then 4 total per day for 4 weeks. And they looked at muscle carnosine. They took a biopsy, and they saw a significant increase as expected. Post-supplementation muscle carnosine levels declined, indicating a half-life of about 8 to 6 to 9 weeks. So 8.6 to 9 weeks. So that's a pretty long half-life. It does stay in your body for quite a long time, which is fine. Again, you're increasing the amount of a naturally occurring buffer, carnosine. Carnosine happens to have a lot of other health benefits besides acting as a buffer. It's also a very good antioxidant. There have been some studies on its effect on longevity and other types of biological measurements that indicate a beneficial nutritional effect. So the long half-life is not surprising. one of the advantages of beta-alanine supplementation, contrary to popular belief, is that you don't have to take it right before your workout, and it's even less important with the sustained release form. You can take it any time of day, and the longer you take it, the number of weeks that you take this supplement really does indicate how much you've accumulated it over time. So by the time you've gotten to week 4, you're getting close to your maximum total amount of beta-alanine, total amount of carnosine in your muscles, and they'll stay in there. That total concentration will remain constant for a while, and will remain high even after you discontinue the supplement. So at that point, after 4 to 6 weeks, if you do forget to use the supplement occasionally, that's fine. It's very similar to creatine. You'll reach your peak level within a month. If you do a loading period, it might be a week. Very similar with beta-alanine. After 4 to 6 weeks, if you use as directed, you'll probably hit your peak. And if you skip the supplement every now and then, it's really not going to have a significant effect on your performance. How do you make beta-alanine last longer? What is the science behind the sustained release form? Just going back to the rationale here, muscle cells can only absorb a small amount in a short period, and that's true for a lot of nutrients. So the remaining beta-alanine is either excreted or it's not used, or both. So the sustained release form helps to increase the muscle retention, and the supply is simply available for a longer period of time, so the muscle can take its time in accumulating it. So it allows greater retention through that strategy. The tetrad matrix technology, this is a microencapsulation process that's shown here. This involves a hydrophilic gel that absorbs fluid to initiate this protective mechanism for the compound to reach a density that allows suspension in fluid. It delivers the sustained release carnosine through the GI tract. It's very well absorbed. It gets into the bloodstream, and then it's released. The matrix absorbs fluid, becomes porous. This is a gradual process that allows the particles to be released very, very gradually. So making something time release is not as simple as many people might believe. It's pretty easy to make a sustained release product, but you have to make sure that it doesn't slowly release and then rapidly release. There's a tendency for erratic release profiles without a validated technology in place, and this is a very effective way of ensuring a true sustained release kinetic profile. This SR beta-alanine increases muscle carnosine content and exercise capacity according to this study of healthy elderly subjects. So here we're not really looking at competitive athletes, we're looking at healthy elderly people who received 1,600 milligrams of SR carnosine twice per day or placebo. So again, this is 3.2 grams per day. And there was an 85.4% increase in muscle carnosine content of the gastrocnemius muscle, which is mainly a fast twitch muscle. 85.4% is very, very high, and this does suggest, considering the fact that studies using younger subjects typically find a smaller increase, does suggest that the less carnosine that you have, possibly the more you'll assimilate, although that hasn't been proven. There was a 36.5% improvement in time to exhaustion in constant load submaximal tests. There was a 12.2% increase in the time to exhaustion in the incremental test, and then the correlation between the increased muscle carnosine content and performance was statistically significant as well. So you don't have to be a competitive athlete to benefit from beta-alanine. The sustained release form is the subject of an increasing number of studies because of its tolerability. People in the studies are less likely to stop taking it, and you can get a smaller dose in and get a good benefit from it. So beta-alanine is available through Clean Athlete. Clean SR beta-alanine provides the clinically researched carnosine, the SR carnosine, to delay fatigue, support muscle endurance, and support exercise capacity during short periods, namely 1 to 4 minutes in duration of intense effort. A lot of individuals can benefit from this without the side effects. We do have plenty of evidence that there are no side effects, although individual results may vary. The recommended dose is 2 tablets twice daily. This is a 3.2 gram dose per day. And some individuals may choose to use higher doses based on their preferences, but this is essentially our recommendation. So, as with all clean athlete supplements, clean SR beta-alanine has undergone rigorous testing by the NSF Certified for Sport program. And for those of you who don't know, NSF International is the leading accredited third-party certifier of dietary supplements, functional foods, and dietary supplement ingredients. It's considered the gold standard, and this program was created to meet the growing demands of athletes, coaches, healthcare professionals, etc., to certify that sports supplements are safe and free from banned substances. And every product from Clean carries the NSF Certified for Sport mark, and that really gives you the peace of mind that the products don't contain any of approximately 270 plus substances that are banned by major athletic organizations. And the contents of the supplement really do match what's printed on the label, which is important. Also, there are no unsafe levels of contaminants in the tested products, and the product is manufactured at a facility that's GMP registered and audited for quality and safety by NSF International. So the program is recognized by the NFL, MLB, MLBPA, PGA, LPGA, and Canadian Center for Ethics in Sports. For more information, you can go to nsfsport.com and you can learn more. But it's all about safety. It's all about giving athletes, coaches, and trainers that peace of mind that they need, that the product is safe, it's free of contaminants, and it's free of banned substances. So with that, I will turn it over to questions. Thank you for your attention.
That was great, Kelly. Thank you so much. We learned a lot from your presentation. There was one question that came in from the audience. This one would be, will you be giving some recommendations for vegetarians and master athletes? I don't know if that refers to just the beta-alanine or general dosing for athletes that might be different from general athletes. Maybe that's what their question is.
That's a great question. Great question. I understand the question completely, and I did mention that older individuals do have lower carnosine content in their muscle, and that's definitely been proven. And vegetarians don't consume as much carnosine. So whether that really translates to adjusted dosing recommendations for beta-alanine really does require some more research that specifically recruits these individuals and looks closely at pre-existing carnosine levels and how well beta-alanine does replete that natural store, and what dosing protocol is ideal. It does require more research, but as with any formulation that we have, we are always making sure that our dosing is safe and effective, and we know that the science does change, research does change, and if there are papers that come out that suggest that we should modify our dosing, we will certainly consider them and let you know about them.
Great response, Kelly. The next question, can this be taken with meals?
It is typically, it's really a matter of preference. These are amino acid related compounds. It's a dipeptide. It's probably best if you take it without food, just because of the fact that it is a dipeptide. The same would pertain if you're referring to any kind of amino acid, just because amino acids in food may compete with one another. Dipeptides are much less likely to compete with one another than free-form amino acids. But it's probably best to take it on an empty stomach.
Thank you. Another question is, what is the benefit of increasing recommended doses beyond 3.2 grams during the hypertrophy phase? Is there a value in preloading sustained release beta-alanine if they will be entering into hypertrophy cycle in the future? So if so, how far in advance should you be taking the product?
With hypertrophy, if that's your goal, if you're periodizing your training with a period of your training cycle focused on hypertrophy, with beta-alanine, even if it's a sustained release, you can, if you want, increase the dose if that's something that you want to try. But individual results are definitely extraordinarily variable. It requires some experimentation, much in the way that creatine supplementation does require a little bit of experimentation. Beta-alanine has been shown to be safe at doses up to about 6 to 7 grams per day for about a year. I think that's the longest study I'm aware of. So safety appears to be a non-issue, although the ISSN position stand did caution that there needs to be more long-term studies on beta-alanine. You can kind of say that for most supplements in general. Of course, we could always have longer-term research. But if you're using it short-term at a high dose, that is within the range of studies that have been done. I would not exceed 6.2 grams a day, even if it is just for a short period, simply because that is, kind of the maximum dose that has been vetted by published studies.
Yeah, good advice, Kelly. Very good. Thank you. The other question we have coming in is, do you recommend increases in doses or different protocols? Well, I guess you just answered that one. You're saying not to go over the 6.2 gram dose.
Yeah, and that's out of an abundance of caution. And keep in mind, we're looking at a pretty good magnitude of effect of up to a 10% improvement in performance at a dose of 3.2 to 6.4 grams a day. So whether you really need to go beyond that from an efficacy standpoint is questionable.
Okay. This question is a good one, I think. They're asking, is there research showing that caffeine supplementation has various effects depending on the individual's genetic metabolic rate? And is there research to indicate anything similar with beta-alanine?
Yeah, great question. The implementation of personalized nutrition in professional and other competitive amateur athletic organizations is going to increase. So the questions are more along the lines of what role does genetics play in how well someone responds to a supplement as far as performance goes. So genetic variation in enzymes that are called beta-alanine transaminases. These are enzymes that determine the systemic availability of beta-alanine. There are polymorphisms that affect these enzymes, but we don't know very much about them. I don't know if there's a way to test for them, but there appears to be a pretty significant inter-individual variability in terms of response, and it might be due to that. It's probably due to other factors as well, but we don't really know very much about these enzymes, the polymorphisms affecting them, and how that would play out in real-world dosing and performance measurements and what to expect. In summary, we don't know enough about these variations to be able to instruct on testing, dosage, and personalization. But I am pretty confident that will be forthcoming. And when we do feel that it's ready to add to recommendations on our product, we certainly would not hesitate to add that to our instructions. Hopefully, that information will, it won't take too long to come out, because it is very exciting to know that there are other factors that you can look at to optimize the dosing for each individual athlete.
Right, that's definitely your area, Kelly, isn't it? Just to understand all those cellular uptake mechanisms. Seems to be you really like to understand every little detail, which is great. Too
much information, right? There's no such thing.
Too much, yeah. Too much for me to take in, but you've got it down for sure. So I think that's all the questions that we have coming in. I just wanted to close and let everyone say that this product is now available on the Clean Athlete website for purchase. It's also available through Douglas Laboratories if you are a healthcare practitioner and have an account with us.